Senator, nice to speak to you, sir.
Greta, great to be with you.
Sir, we're all paying very close attention to the president's announcement that he and the First Lady have tested positive for the coronavirus. What should the president say to the nation? What would you recommend?
Well, I was encouraged by the statement that neither the president nor the First Lady are symptomatic. That's certainly a good sign. They're obviously under the care of physicians, and I assume they'll keep the nation informed should he get sick. I think the treatment regimen for the president is anyone who has been sick, which sadly across the globe now is millions and millions of people who have been sick with COVID, which is to be under the care of a doctor, to follow medical advice, and try to get healthy again. And I'm certainly hopeful that he will, but in the meantime, he's taking reasonable precautions and quarantining, which is the right thing to do.
You talk about reasonable precautions. We have the visual of his staff, for instance, traveling to the debate, all going on Air Force One, all touching the rail, not wearing masks. We have the family at the debate, no masks. The Biden family was wearing masks. Cleveland Clinic, where sponsored, asked for masks. I mean, what's the message that's being sent by the president and his family?
Well, look, the president, the security protocols around the president are unusual. I've traveled with the president a number of times, and every person who comes in proximity with the president is tested right before you do. I remember several weeks ago, I was flying with the president on Air Force One out to Midland, Texas, and everyone had to go to the White House and be tested at the White House before you could get on the plane. And it so happened one of the people joining us on the plane was Congressman Louis Gohmert. And Louis went to the White House and he was tested. The test came back positive, and obviously they said, okay, you can't get on the plane. And he didn't, and Louis is healthy now and better. That is a different scenario where you're containing the people around the president, and they've done a vigorous job of that. In this instance, apparently Hope Hicks somehow contracted the disease. We know it's a very contagious pandemic, and then it appears that it was passed at least to the president and the First Lady.
We talk about how contagious it is, and we don't know for sure if he even got from Hope Hicks or from another source.
Sure.
But oftentimes, I mean, you don't necessarily get the symptoms until several days after you've begun to get the viral load. In that sort of period of what experts say was his meeting with Judge Barrett. Should she be quarantined? Because she's meeting with, I assume, you and many other U.S. senators. There are a lot of people that he's been around. I mean, where should this umbrella of quarantine expand to?
Well, I can tell you with Judge Barrett, I met with her earlier this week, and when we met, we were socially distanced. The chairs were set up probably 8 feet apart. And so we talked, but at far enough distance that it was within the CDC guidelines. And that was, to the best of my knowledge, fairly rigorously followed. Look, there is a challenge in today's modern era that every American, every person across the world is following, that there is a balance between using sound science and reasonable precautions, but also just not locking yourself in a bubble in the closet for the next year. And everyone is having to find a reasonable balance in that regard. I do think with Judge Barrett that we actually scheduled the meetings. Ordinarily, those Supreme Court meetings, every other nominee has come by our offices. And so that you would have a nominee coming by in normal times, 100 Senate offices that you'd come into the office and sit down and talk and have an interview. In this instance, they didn't do it. They did all of the meetings in the Capitol in one room. And it's a room called the Mansfield Room, which is a big room. It's the room where the majority party typically has lunch during the week. And the reason they did that was specifically to set it up where the chairs could be spread apart and there could be significant social distance.
Despite the pandemic, business is going forward on Capitol Hill. There are hearings. We're going to have a Senate hearing, I presume, for Judge Barrett's confirmation.
Right.
And I don't know. I mean, a lot of people are going to congregate in the Capitol and at the hearings. What are the current testing protocols at the Capitol, and what should they be? Because, you talked about how the White House has testing protocols, and we've seen now that in spite of that, the president has the virus. What are the current protocols for the Capitol, and what should they be?
So there's no mandatory testing protocol at the Capitol. Every senator has been tested multiple times. But
staff too? Your staff?
No, and the staff testing is not nearly It's not uniform, and I would say not as widespread. Um, it varies office by office what the protocols are in terms of what staff is doing. In my office, early on in COVID, I had all of my office, both in DC, all of my staff and my state staff in the various district offices, all of them work from home and telecommute. We did that for several months and set up a virtual office where we were able to do our jobs via telecommuting. We're now, I would say, on a partial staff in DC where we try to respect social distancing in our office. Staff wears masks in many instances, not 100% of the time, but in many instances, and certainly when we're out in common areas and traveling through the Capitol. And as I said, some staff are working in the office, some are not. The Senate itself, we've had multiple senators test positive for COVID. Thankfully, those that have recovered. No one that I know of has been seriously ill. A couple have gotten ill, but it hasn't been. I'm not aware of anyone who's been hospitalized. In terms of how we vote, we're trying, and we've been asked to respect social distancing on the floor. I will confess, with 100 elected politicians that are used to glad handing and putting their arms around each other, it is not the most natural constraint on that body, but I think we've seen members endeavoring to follow it. In terms of Senate hearings, we've changed how we do hearings quite significantly, in that hearings are socially distanced, so we've spread out. We have hearings in much, much bigger rooms than we typically have them. Each senator is at least 6 feet apart from the other senator. Some senators participate virtually via video, and so there have been significant steps to try to mitigate the risk, but with a contagious disease, it is impossible to eliminate the risk and take it to zero. And so I think we've taken reasonable steps to slow the spread and reduce it.
You've written a new book, One Vote Away From, and How a Single Supreme Court Seat Can Change History. What prompted you writing that book?
Well, I wrote the book this summer and this fall, actually during COVID lockdown. So it was when I was at home in Houston, was sitting in my living room, and so pulled out the laptop and wrote the book. And I wrote it because I think the topic is exceptionally important, and I think it's something that a lot of people don't fully understand. They look at the court and it can be confusing. They don't quite understand what's going on there. As you know, before I was in the Senate, I was a Supreme Court litigator. My career was arguing cases in front of the Supreme Court, and so in the book, what I do is each different chapter addresses a different constitutional liberty. So there's a chapter on free speech. There's a chapter on religious liberty. There's a chapter on the Second Amendment. There's a chapter on U.S. sovereignty. There's a chapter on democracy and elections and Bush versus Gore, all of which could be immediately relevant if we have a contested election this time. And what I do in each of the chapters is tell war stories. Try to take the reader inside, behind the curtain at the court, to understand what was going on in the cases, who the justices are, what the issues were, who the litigants are, what's the backstory behind this case. And many of the key landmark cases in each of those areas, I helped litigate. And so I can tell the story from a firsthand perspective because I was part of the team arguing the case or briefing the case or participating in litigating it. And so the book really tries to make it's designed, you don't have to be a lawyer to enjoy it, to find it interesting, to learn from it. It's designed to bring these issues alive in a way that's interesting and fun. And I have to say, it's really striking. On issue after issue after issue, many of the key landmark cases were 5-4, meaning we are just one vote away from losing many of our precious liberties.
All right. In 2016, you were quoted as saying that you're quoting Justice Breyer, that the court can operate on less than a full complement of 9. And it really was in context of the Judge Merrick Garland, appointed by President Obama to the Supreme Court. He never got a hearing. How do you justify now, and that was like 7 or 8 months out from the election, yep. I mean, how do you justify now pushing through Judge Barrett before inauguration, if not within the next 6 weeks?
Yeah. Well, they're very different circumstances, and both were consistent with historical precedent and practice. If you look at the situation of a Supreme Court vacancy happening during a presidential election year, that's happened 29 times in our nation's history. Presidents have made nominations all 29. It's clear that's what presidents do. Whether you're a Democrat or Republican, you nominate someone if there's a vacancy. The Senate, what the Senate has done has varied widely, and the historical precedent is if the Senate and the president are of the same party, that's happened 19 times, the Senate has confirmed that nominee 17 of those times. So the precedent is in most circumstances, the Senate confirms a nominee from the same party, even if it is a presidential election year. On the other hand, if the Senate and president are of a different party, in 2016, Obama was a Democrat, the Senate was in Republican control. That's happened 10 times. In history, the Senate has confirmed those nominees only twice. And that's not simply a partisan differential. It's actually something far more significant and fundamental, which is it is the Constitution's system of checks and balances. The only way you get Supreme Court justices is the president and the Senate coming together. And in these elections in 2016, 2018, 2014, before that, judges and the Supreme Court in particular was a major issue that was contested. And the American people made a choice to elect President Trump, to elect a Republican Senate. And that choice, by nominating Judge Barrett, Donald Trump is honoring his promise to the voters, and by confirming Judge Barrett, the Republican majority is honoring our promise to the voters.
Republican Governor Abbott of your state has issued a proclamation allowing only one mail ballot drop-off box per county. Harris County, which is 4.7 million people, a very populous Texas county, had 12. It goes down to 1. What is the justification for doing that? Because it certainly does limit the ability of people to sort of easily go out and vote if they've got to go look for the 1, and when there were 12.
Well, I haven't examined the exact legal basis for that decision. My understanding is that decision was pursuant to state law. And as I understand it, the location is the county courthouse, which is the seat of the county. Yes, there are a lot of people in Harris County. I live in Harris County. That being said, Harris County is a very mobile county. We don't have a whole lot. We don't have mass transit in significant regards. Everyone drives in Houston. It's not New York City. It's not Philly. It's not Boston. Houston's a city that grew up after the advent of the automobile. We're spread out. But the county courthouse is not difficult to get to for anyone in the county.
Couldn't you just have the 12 in that county? Because I mean, doing this like basically on the eve of election. I mean, why not just have the 12 if that's what the plan was?
I don't know. I assume from what I've seen from the press coverage that the governor concluded that doing so was inconsistent with state law. My view is we should follow state law and we should be consistent with the requirements of the law. I understand there was also an issue, a concern that the county leadership had opened up annexes, these separate and additional facilities. And as I understand it, we're not allowing poll watchers to go in and monitor those facilities. I think that was one of the reasons, and one of the justifications was a concern about the potential for voter fraud. At the county courthouse, as I understand it, there are poll watchers that are able to watch to make sure that the election is conducted with integrity. We have seen Texas has a history when it comes to absentee voting of ballot harvesters, of people who go, say, to a nursing home and fill out multiple ballots. And in some instances, you have unscrupulous political operatives who will take advantage of people who are elderly, who may not have all their faculties, and fill out a ballot, sometimes fill out the ballot for them. And the challenge has been that if the operatives are willing to break the law, they can either suggest you vote for the candidate they prefer, or if you vote the wrong way, they can just take your ballot and throw it in the trash. And so that there has been a history. It's why actually Texas passed laws restricting absentee ballots, because we had a problem in South Texas, actually, in Democratic primaries. What's interesting is Texas's law was championed by Democrats because it was Democratic primaries where these paid operatives were stealing votes. And so the Texas legislature acted to reduce the risk of that.
All right, one last question. You talked about how the politics and the selection of Supreme Court justice. If President Trump loses re-election, Vice President Biden is elected, and then if the Senate goes Democrat, it's very close right now, Democrat versus Republican. There has been a suggestion by some Democratic senators they would like to expand the Supreme Court. There is there has been efforts in history, but it's been 9 people since the 1800s. But that's politics, and they would certainly have the right to do it. There's no constitutional impediment. So your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that is a very real risk. I would take those threats with deadly seriousness. I think if the Democrats win, if it is Biden and Pelosi and Schumer, I think within a few weeks in the Senate, they will end the filibuster, which will eliminate the ability of the Senate minority to stop whatever radical agenda they want to force through. I think we will see early on in the tenure, if they have a majority, 2 new states admitted to the Union. I think they will admit both the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico. Their reason for doing so is nakedly and crassly political. They believe that those jurisdictions would elect 4 new Democratic senators. So we could start January with 50 Democrats in the Senate and end the year with 54 Democrats in the Senate. I think they view that as a way to entrench their power. And then on packing the court, a number of Senate Democrats have explicitly threatened to do so. I think that threat is real. All of us saw Joe Biden in the debate. It was one of the first questions he got asked, and he refuses to answer. And the reason I believe he refuses to answer is because his answer is yes. That's what his party wants. That's what the hard left wants. And I think that would profoundly delegitimize the court. It would politicize the court. We've seen a Democratic president try to do that. FDR tried to do that at the height of his power. And his own party, the Democratic Party, said, no, that is bad for the court and the rule of law, and they opposed him. I don't think today's Democrats would have the same courage to stand up and oppose the effort to pack the court. And really, if you want to understand why that is so concerning, my book, One Vote Away, goes through issue after issue. If you value free speech, your ability to criticize politicians without the federal government muzzling you, those protections are just one vote away. There were 4 justices to take away those rights. If you value religious liberty, living according to your faith, according to your conscience, those landmark decisions, many of which I litigated personally, were 5-4. There were 4 justices to take away those rights. And if you value the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms, I represented Texas and 30 other states in Heller versus District of Columbia, the landmark case on the Second Amendment. There were 4 justices willing to conclude and who voted in dissent that the Second Amendment protects 0 individual rights, none whatsoever, that you and I and no Americans have any individual rights under the Second Amendment, that the government could ban every gun in America. That's a radical position, and we are just one vote away.
But would you agree that the Constitution doesn't bar them from doing it? They would have the right to do it. And secondly, the people, if they elect the Democrats to be the majority, they're saying that they want that.
You are correct that the Constitution gives Congress the power to set the number of Supreme Court justices. It hasn't been 9 always. At various times in history, it's been as low as 5. It's been as high as 10. That being said, it has been 9 justices for 150 years, over 150 years. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was asked about ideas to pack the court. Her response, she said that she thought 9 was a good number, and it was a mistake when FDR tried to pack the court, and it would be a mistake now. I think Justice Ginsburg was right in that.
And but by the people electing the Democrats, they're giving them the authority to do so. I mean, you don't dispute that.
There is constitutional authority for Congress to alter the number of Supreme Court justices. It's simply exceptionally bad policy, and it undermines the independence of the judiciary, and it sets up a natural escalation. If the Democrats come in and add 2 justices to the court and go to 11, the natural escalation is the next time the Republicans come in, we take it to 13, and the Senate turns the Supreme Court into essentially another legislature, a political body. I think that is a very bad idea. Yes, they could do it. It doesn't mean they should. And I think this is a really compelling reason why I'm going to vote for Donald Trump and not Joe Biden, and why I'm going to vote for a Republican senator, John Cornyn in Texas, and not his Democratic opponent, because I think this matters. And I would encourage folks at home, if you want to understand these issues better, as people discuss the Supreme Court, it gets confusing. My new book, One Vote Away, brings you inside and makes it interesting and understandable. You can buy it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere you get books, it's available right now. If you want to understand what the stakes are in the 2020 election, I think the book is a very helpful tool. And if you want to understand, we're in the midst of an epic gladiatorial battle over Judge Barrett, and I think the book is a really helpful tool to understanding what's going on there too.
Senator, thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Greta. Take care.